that on?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I want to welcome everyone tonight, and I want to thank those at home that's watching on the internet. I had some really nice comments this past Sundays, and wanted to reach out to and let you know we're having a handout just about every Wednesday. I have one tonight. If you come in on Sunday, there's some extras sitting back here on the desk on the entryway. And if there's not, if you'll ask me for one, if they're gone or something, I'd be glad to make you one. Jump into this tonight. There's a lot going on. The theme tonight is Days of Noah. And I wondered about, I came across this a couple of weeks ago, and I've been doing a little more work on it. My question to you is, we're told that at the end times it will be as Days of Noah, right? We all know that. We've been through that. What's that mean to you? You ever stop and think about what we know that things were bad. We know Sodom and Gomorrah's story. We know that God wasn't pleased with what was going on. But what was really going on, and what was the cause of the fact that God decided he wanted to wipe humanity off the face of the earth? What was going on with the people at that time that it was the days of Noah? So I thought there's some comparisons I want to make. Of course, we don't know exactly what was going on. What we do know was that either they're called the sons of God, and that's open to interpretation on exactly what sons of God means. There's no definitive part of that, but we do know that there were fallen angels, and it could be that the sons of God were the fallen angels, or it could be something entirely different. We don't know that with certainty, but we do know there were, as is called in Genesis, sons of God. We also know that there were fallen angels at that time. And what happened, we know that the fallen angels came down, mated with mankind, and created an offspring that was not of God's doing. That we know. And through that, if you stop and think about it, it was the devil's opportunity to take those fallen angels that he had brought down with him to try to circumvent God's plan. And since man was God's greatest creation, when you stop and think about it, he was able to mess with God, so to speak, by doing something to circumvent the creation as God intended. Now, if you keep that in mind, as we know, they mated with God's creation, with women. They created offspring. We don't have time to get into the whole Nephilim story and everything, but we've all heard of that, and we've talked about giants. Did the giants exist? Yes, they did. There's quite a bit of archaeological data showing that they did exist. In fact, just back, and you may have never even saw this, but there's a, let's see, what's that called? Look at the name. Kafar Monash Horde. And what that was, there was an archaeologist in 1962 that came across some buried tools and weapons just off the coast of the Mediterranean in the middle part of Israel, near Haifa. He found weapons, shields, armor that had to be worn by people that was somewhere between 10 and 15 feet tall. And some of them kind of poo-pooed it and said, well, this is just ceremonial stuff that was made back then. No, it wasn't. As they got into this and they got studying it more, especially with modern day forensics, they have determined that these were actually weapons, and most all of them that were recovered in this finding had been used. So the thing of it is, no man today could use any of these weapons that they found at that time. It had to be by super large people. We know that the Nephilim existed, and the thing of it is, God's creation was perverted during that time. They became so wicked and evil that God chose to remove all of them from earth. And we know that it was done by the flood, and also Sodom and Gomorrah is a good example. We know the story of Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah, and it's interesting that in the last 2 years, which many of you know, Sodom and Gomorrah was actually found. The site for that, the archaeological site was found. They determined, yes, this was Sodom and Gomorrah, and they also determined, yes, it was destroyed by superheat. So there again, so much in the modern day era here has been facts that were in the Bible being verified by science today. You look at it, that's one of the good things of science. There's good things that come out of this science that we're in. And just like the internet, there's good things that come out of the internet. But at the same time, Satan takes anything he can and perverts it for his own use. But the thing of it is, with what happened after the flood, if you go to Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, if you were to read through that, you will find that not only were the people destroyed at the flood, where they were sons of gods or fallen angels, they showed back up 100 years later. If you look at that, and the reason we know that is, when did the Tower of Babel come on scene? How long after Noah come back and landed? 100 years. And we know at that time, God had wiped out his problem on earth. He had killed the creatures he wanted to kill, and I refer to them as creatures because that's what they were. They were not of his doing. He wiped that out, but they reappeared 100 years later during the time of Babel, and that's when you start looking at it. Nimrod, of course, founded Babel, and Nimrod was considered, most likely, they think that he was a very large person, a great warrior, a great hunter. And there again, we know that after the ark came back, there were still, again, giants were present on the earth. And it has to be from the standpoint that even though God wiped it out, Satan was able to bring back that again to be contrary to God's will. So let's talk about a little bit about now. Okay, how does that relate to today? How is today's days of Noah? When Jesus was talking about as in the days of Noah and the end times, these things will occur. Well, let's stop and think about what's going on. You guys read it every day. I just made a list of a few things. Man is perverting God's creation again. We've been talking several years now in Bible study on these animals that's being created by man, the species being crossed. There's some talk, I don't know, you talk about GMO vegetables, GMO grains, etc. There are some people around some parts of the world will not buy grain from the United States because it's GMO, genetically modified. GMO means genetically modified organism. Well, that may or may not be God's creation. Maybe God brought that about, but there again, maybe he did not bring that about. So you got to stop and think about that. The big thing is that we are getting to the point that if you look at the news today, you can see that man's come to the point he no longer feels a need to follow God's laws. Now, if you go back and look at world governments, all the governments around the world, shortly after Jesus left this earth, all the governments that were created thereafter, almost all of them, utilized God's laws as a basis for setting their governments up. Of course, we know the story here, a prime example. Our Constitution and laws are all developed around the Ten Commandments. And in God we trust. Well, you find that there's a lot of continuity of that all the way around the world. In fact, Pastor mentioned it last Sunday. Muhammad, he didn't come on the scene until between 500 and 600 BC, BC. He came after Jesus. And really, you look through the Quran and the Hadith that they print, so many of their laws and rules are just pretty much copied from what was laid out in the Bible. They just tweaked a a little bit to make them, Muhammad tweaked things to make it fit. Muhammad was pretty sharp. I don't think he went to school, but really a lot of people don't know this. Muhammad was a highwayman. He was a crook. He started out, what he was doing was robbing caravans coming across the desert. That's what his life started out as. And he took so much of the Bible and copied that story and put it together to what they have today in the Quran. It's really interesting if you sit down and start looking at the comparison between the two, because it's quite striking. There's a lot of comparisons. But anyhow, since Jesus' time up until recently, all the countries have been following pretty much God's laws, God's dictates. But look what's happened, especially here, and especially in the Western world in the last few years, especially the last 2 decades. Man it's back again. We're told, Jesus says that knowledge will increase in the end times. All right, we can take that 2 ways. One may be, and we talked about this before, the knowledge he was referring to may be man's knowledge of the Bible and of the end times. But on the other hand, man's knowledge has increased to the point now the man doesn't need God. That's what we've been seeing go along. Man does not feel he needs God because he's so smart now. He's got the answers. And that's the whole basis for this theme of, hey, I'm in control. You hear the same thing now with the abortion thing. I'm in control of my body. I don't need anyone to tell me what to do. And we're seeing this time through all things that's going on now that's counterproductive in our governments is man dictating. Show you how smart they are. This come out just in the last couple of days, and I think I've got it somewhere further in this, but I'll mention it now. Man is so smart that look at what California is doing. California pastor mentioned this the other day or last week. They have banned all gasoline cars, no gasoline cars to be sold in 10 years. Okay? Today they come out and they're telling people, look, we've got an electricity emergency. There's going to be blackouts. We don't want you guys using electricity between 2 and 4 or 6 in the afternoon. And especially, and they listed this, no charging of cars. Now stop and think about this. How ignorant can you be, and how little forethought can be given to this stuff that they're doing? And I could stand up here for an hour and give you multiple situations of this of where they're not thinking ahead. But that shows you how smart they are. The thing of it is, man is now so smart that he is free to determine what's right and wrong. And that's what feeds into Jesus talking to the disciples and saying, you know, people will call good bad, bad good, because they're smart. They figured it all out. So they've got it figured out. And now with the artificial intelligence coming along, they can figure it out quicker and quicker. And they're getting the answers very quick. Look at what's going on. There's no need for family anymore. Government will take care of you. Stop and think about it. Government's going to take care of you. You don't need family. And this has trickled down now to the fact that even children don't need permission to do major things. You know, there's some parts of the country, and especially in Europe, in Western Europe, a 12-year-old child doesn't need to ask her parents if they want to change sex or not. What they're preaching now is that these kids, they're indoctrinated. It's all about indoctrination. And I'll end up with that here in a few minutes on why that's being done. But the indoctrination now is a child that's maybe 3 or 4 years old. Those parents are being instructed that if that child, they're seeing all this stuff. They're seeing all this transgenderism and LBGT and all this stuff out there. The kids are being exposed to it on a daily basis, a lot of times in school, especially on the TV and the internet. So they come up and ask Mommy, here's a 3-year-old, Mommy, am I a boy or a girl? You know what they want that mother to tell that child? That's for you to decide. That's verbatim out of what I just read out of a book that's part of one of these abortion clinics that one of the handouts they have. They're instructing mothers. If your child asks you whether it's a boy or a girl, you tell them it's for them to decide. 3-year-old. Stop and think about that. The pastor sent me a thing this last week. You're talking about how this indoctrination started, especially back in the 60s when I was in school, and it started at the college level heavily. They started indoctrinating kids at that level, and it's a self-perpetuating thing, and they've gotten younger and younger and younger on the indoctrination schedule. This thing didn't happen overnight. It's happened over time. And you stop and think about it. You look at the colleges today, all the kids going to college are getting indoctrinated in this stuff towards, you're smart, you can figure it all out for yourself, and by the way, here's what we think. And that is a terrible thing. But now it's actually come back down, and we've seen it in high school levels, seeing it in the elementary levels. There's school systems in this country that are indoctrinating kindergarten and first graders on this stuff as part of the curriculum. It's not a hidden fact. Jeff sent me I was going to say this indoctrination in kindergarten was and this has happened all across the country. They bring drag queens in to play with the little kids in school. And pastor sent me one the other day where guess who was one of the big supporters of it? Antifa. Antifa showed up for it. Antifa was part of the promotion. So you can see what they're doing. Jeff sent me a thing today, and it's just absolutely amazing. It's a new comedy that's coming out, and they're hyping it all up. It's a cartoon, an adult cartoon, right, Jeff? Kids and adults. It's the voiceover on it is Danny DeVito and his daughter, and it's all about it's called Little Devils or Little Demons, and it is strictly satanic across the board, and it's an educational satanic animation's what it is. Just coming out, and they're hyping it, aren't they? I mean, the one from what Jeff sent me. It just goes on and on and on. Just before I came in this evening, I always look at the news at 5:30 to see where we're gone to war yet or not before I come in. But I pick it up and one of the headlines comes out. 20 Major League Baseball teams here in the United States are now all on board promoting transgenderism. They are supporting them financially. They're supporting them by having special days at the ballpark. And then, 2 slides over from that, guess what else pops up? I have a copy of a manual that Kroger's, largest food company in the United States, Kroger's is giving all their employees, giving them, and it shows exactly what they're supposed to do. It explains all this LGBTQ grammar, where you can't call them him or her anymore, whatever they want. It explains that. It urges all their employees, we need you to be aware of this, and we need you to approach our customers this way. Even to the point they are urging their customers to support like a transgender holiday, which that stuff's coming up. They started that this summer. You're going to see more and more. Yeah, Kroger's. It's to the point, when I see stuff like that, I want to take my Kroger card and walk up there and get a basket of food like I normally do and walk up to the counter, ask for the manager, take my card out, cut the card in two, and tell them I'll never shop in your store again. But when you get back to it, and eventually, and that may be the way we need to start preparing ourselves for what's coming, because you can't shop with any major company right now that's not doing this stuff. I mean, it'd be hard pressed to find it. And it's all back to what I mentioned a few weeks ago about this ESG score that the companies are doing. They're all living by this now. By Kroger putting this thing out and by Major League Baseball doing what they're doing, they're raising their ESG score. Because remember, it involves environmental, social, and governance. And they raise their social scores. And that's a driving thing right now. A prime example is Blackrock. I don't think we talked about Blackrock in here. We did in our other Bible studies. Blackrock is one of the very, very largest economic firms in the world that provides funding. They're the ones that control so much of the pension funds, mutual funds, things of that nature. They provide financing all around the world. Huge, and just extremely powerful. They will loan money now to companies based on their ESG score, and that's all they're doing. You don't have a very good ESG score, don't even bother coming and talking to them. They're not going to loan you any money. So that's how that's being controlled. Then to end this up on this, because I'm going to run out of time here in a second, we're to the point now there's no need for a mother and father to have a child. Did you pick up on that this last week? They have created an embryo, a mouse embryo. They let it live 8 days. They let it live until it showed a faint heartbeat, meaning it's alive. They created a mouse embryo without sperm or egg. They created it from a stem cell. Totally man-made life form. Now stop and think about that. Just think about that. That's what we're faced with. Okay, get off that real quick. I'll hustle through these other. Mideast update. Iran now controls Iraq. Iraq's been controlled by two parties. One was a Shia military organization, and the other is a Shia religious sect. The religious people, you know, I can't pull the name out now, but the heads of the religious was calling the shots. The military's taken over. The religious is let go. The reason this is important is that now the Iran Guard, which is their military, is now in there directing what's going on in Iraq. I point out this because Iran is busily preparing for war with Israel. It's every day there's stuff. Other countries, this is how bad it is. And this is all set up because Biden walked out of Afghanistan. And Iran now has just about run us totally, meaning USA, and actually all the Western powers other than France, out of the Mideast. And it's so bad now that the UAE, which is, if you remember, is Sunni, not Shia, they hate each other. The United Arab Emirates is Sunni, they're not Shia, but guess what? This last week, they've reached out to Iran and they want to open diplomatic ties with them again. The reason being they're scared to death of Iran because they know that if Iran is successful in overrunning Israel, that they'll be next. And so now they're back, and it's all because there's a void there, void in power again in the Mideast. They're stepping up military placements around Israel. They have, what their strategy is a ring of fire around Israel. Whenever they pull the trigger, and make no doubt about it, they still say it every week, that they're going to eliminate Israel from the face of the earth. That's their desire. They've been saying this for years, and they say it frequently. So why would you not take them at their word with everything they're doing? But what they're doing, they're trying to circle Israel with so much firepower, both on the ground, and that's why the Iraq thing, it helps them. But the missiles in the air, and when they light the fuse, it's going to launch everything at one time and overwhelm Israel. And it probably will. Everything I've been reading, and if you listen to Safari Marte, Israel can't handle it all at one time. They'll do a good job, but they won't be able to handle it at one time. So is that the precursor to the Gog-Magog war where Jesus or Lord's going to come in and wipe out the opposition? Don't know, but it's a darn good possibility with everything else that's going on. We don't know that answer, but we know that's coming. The thing that may light it off, Israel's ready to start pumping natural gas out of the Karish oil field, which is just off the coast of Israel in the Mediterranean in the Lebanon area. And what Hezbollah is telling Israel is, hey, look, if you start doing that, and they've already launched some drones out towards the drilling rigs, if you don't fix the Lebanon-Israeli border problem, and that's a clash area because, for one reason, the ground's a little higher, and the reason Iran wants that fixed with Lebanon, so they can come in and they've got another elevated platform that they can shoot in, they can shoot in toward Israel. But they're saying if you don't do that, then we're going to take action. So that could be the fuse over there. Real quick, in Ukraine, Russia is caught using fuel as a weapon. They've cut off gas for 3 days today, natural gas totally. They've told them multiple times, guys, if the UE doesn't knuckle under to what Russia wants, they're going to cut their fuel off this winter. And as it is now, it's the UE, the European Union, is in terrible disarray because right now, with the decrease that's been coming in the gas, their ability to make electricity this winter is going to be limited. And they're forecasting that their people could see 1,000% increase in electricity and fuel costs this winter. Stop and think about that. They're already putting out mandates that you can only set your thermometers either so high or so low, or your thermostats. So that's pretty ugly. The Iranian, it's funny, Iran and Russia is working very close together now. But it was kind of funny to me this week. Iran really must be pretty good with their drones and stuff, but there's some problem in that they shipped a bunch of drones to Russia, and they've been training Russians in Iran to use their drones. But they shipped them up, and they started to try and use them in the Ukraine, and the suckers don't work. And so Russia's kind of upset right now. But they are working very closely together, and this is back to the Biden deal that's getting ready to happen. If that happens, if they go ahead and sign this agreement with Iran again, they're going to be flooded with money, and Russia's already in position, already got things set up. They're dealing with fuel, dealing with armament, and they're dealing with food between Russia and Iran. It's a big deal. And it's been going on for several months now. Real quick, just a couple more things here. Anybody been tuned into the Pope this last week? Oh man, we knew he was into climate change, big time. It's unbelievable. The whole thing, of course, is being used to force the one world government. What's better than the climate change, and what's better at the timing that we have now? Pastor was mentioning, and I totally believe too. I've never thought that man caused climate change. I've always thought that was baloney. And the thing, like Pastor talked about last Sunday, they're finding these monuments being uncovered in these lakes and rivers that's been covered up for 600 years or more. That tells you this has happened before. You look at tree ring study and things of that nature. You look at Antarctic ice and Arctic ice core samples. This has all happened before, multiple times, that where we go in these big swings in weather. But anyhow, right now they're using this to help force the one world government. He says that, this is a quote, Pope says that COVID was nature's response to man harming the environment. All right? That's the head of the Catholic Church. And it's really funny, you read through his speech, he talks about Mother Nature, he talks about nature like it's a living being. He talks about it almost like it's another God. And I think that's the way he looks at it. He says, abusing Mother Earth is a huge sin. That's a quote. Last things. California called for electric emergency to cut usage. I talked about that. Solomon Islands, who we liberated in World War II, denying our ships to dock in the Solomons. Reason being, China's forcing it.
Right.
China's forcing them to do that. You stop and think about how things turn around in 75 years. We can't dock our ships in the Solomons anymore. And there was a lot of blood spilled there. Taiwan, I don't want to leave without mentioning Taiwan. Taiwan has fired at Russian drones, or at China drones. China sent some drones over across the channel, and this time Taiwan actually fired live ammunition at them. So that's another little bit of the flame coming up. And I want to close with this. I ask you, how do you change a culture? How do you change our culture here? They're doing it right in front of us, been doing it. You start out by changing the cultural values. You take marriage out of the picture. You take God out of the picture, number one, here, in most places in the world. That's your first step, all right? Change the values that the culture's based on. Just like I was talking about, we used to have all the laws were based upon Mosaic laws and laws that came out of or the things that Jesus taught, set up the laws on so many of these countries. The next thing you do, you rewrite the history. What we've been seeing going on this last year here. They've been rewriting history left and right.
They've been doing that for a long time.
Yeah, well, now they're pulling down the statues, totally eliminating even being able to see. And for a child won't be able to walk up to a like Monticello and see a statue and say, hey, what's this place about? Who was that guy? Okay, that's being done. It's been done a lot. The last thing you do, or at the same time you're doing this, you start indoctrinating the citizens. And what we were just talking about tonight, right? We indoctrinate the citizens. And now we're cleared down to indoctrinating our children at a level that you don't have an ability to indoctrinate them on, but they're getting it at school. Okay? So, and guess whose playbook that is? Those three things I just read.
Marxism.
It was done 1962 to about 76. No, it was Mao, the Great China Revolution. Thank you all. There is a handout tonight for us. And the handout tonight is on what's going on in Canada as far as a new digital thing they're doing. And it's in cahoots with the World Economic Forum. And I think it's a very interesting read. Because the headline says, Canada right now is the USA next. So